Grand. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for joining us at this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of the Combined Authority. And I'm going to start the meeting, please, by asking our officers to note any apologies for absence and substitutions, please.
We just have one apology, which comes from Councillor Patricia Jordan from Huntingdonshire District Council, and she is substituted by Councillor Mike Humphrey.
Thank you very much indeed, and I can see Councillor Humphrey there, so welcome to the meeting, Councillor Humphrey. The second item of business, we also declare a roll call, please. So if I could ask Robert Fox to read out a list of all members, and we can confirm our presence by saying yes or present, please.
Okay, so from Cambridge City Council, Councillor Mike Davey.
Present.
Councillor Marcus Gearing.
Present.
Cambridgeshire County Council, Councillor David Connor.
Present.
Councillor Jocelyn Scott. There's a lip red present. There you go. Thank you.
I think can we sort out Councillor Scott's microphone or whatever, because even when she's marked as not muted, we can't hear her, or at least I can't.
I can't either.
No.
We can't hear you, Jocelyn. Can we move on and leave space for Councillor Scott to organise her microphone?
East Cambridgeshire County District Council, Councillor Lorna Dupree.
Present.
And Councillor Alan Sharp. Councillor Sharp.
Present.
Fenland District Council, Councillor Anne Hay.
Present.
And Councillor David Mason.
Present.
Huntingdonshire, Councillor Steve Courtney.
Present.
And Councillor Mike Humphrey.
Present.
Peterborough City Council, Councillor Andy Coles.
Present.
Councillor Ed Murphy.
Present.
And finally, South Cambridgeshire District Council, Councillor Grenville Chamberlain.
Present.
And Councillor Peter Fane. Councillor Fane.
Present.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Scott, can we just confirm that you've managed to sort your audio out? No. We still can't hear you. Perhaps somebody could, one of the officers could perhaps assist Councillor Scott by a phone or some other medium to make sure she can contribute to the meeting. But in the meantime, I'll move on then. Declarations of interest then. Does any member have any interest to declare in any of the items on the agenda today? Take that as a no. I don't see any indications. Thank you very much. Then we have the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 26th of October. Can I accept those as a correct record?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. And then item 4 is public questions. Robert Fox.
No public questions received.
No public questions. Thank you very much indeed. So item 5 then is the chair of the business board, and we should have with us, joining us, Austin Adams, who is chair of the Combined Authorities Business Board. Sue, is Austin available? Ah, there we are. Good morning, Austin.
Good morning. I was in a holding pattern, waving at you furiously, but...
Indeed, but you are now with us. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. So Is there anything that you would like to update us on to do with the business board before I hope you'll go on and accept any questions we have based on what you have to say?
Yeah, for sure.
Marvellous.
There's an awful lot going on. I'm not sure how long you've got, but I think there are a number of points that as a structure I could quickly try and work us through by way of a bit of background, what we're about, what we're trying to get done, what the strategies are that we're deploying to deliver that, where we are with the investments that the business board have supported, and how that's shaping up. I can touch on skills and a little bit of an update on where we are with the university and so on and so forth, and maybe just swing back on governance, give you an update on some of the aspects of governance since we last spoke. So just by way of background, what we're about is trying to double the GVA by 2042. That means year-on-year growth of about 2.3%. The current circumstances with regard to COVID, of course, have taken that back quite a step. And what that means then is that we need to redouble our efforts, and we need more exciting programs and harder deliverables going forward to catch that back up. So since we last spoke, of course, our attention has very much been centered around two things. One is dealing with the short-term issues of COVID, but also thinking through the longer-term investments and how they will accelerate the recovery when we get into a slightly better position. So things that underpin that for us in terms of strategy, of course, we've got the local industrial strategy. Now that's been around for a little while now. We're continuously reviewing that, of course, and in light of the COVID situation, we have developed a new local economic recovery strategy that builds off the original LIS, but is as you will imagine, appropriately aligned to dealing with some of the shorter term issues and some of the issues that couldn't possibly have been foreseen when the original industrial strategy was put together. Fundamental to that is the speed at which we can understand what's happening in the economy with respect to people, jobs, investments, and adjust the plans accordingly as quickly as possible. An important element of that is to make sure we've got a really strong evidence base of information. There's a lot of information out there at the moment. Some of it is more of greater integrity and substance than others, and being able to make sure that we've got that information, that it's as real time as possible because it's changing very quickly, is fundamental to our ability then to adjust our plans. So a recent innovation is, we used to going out and commissioning reports on such matters, and the outcome of which is you get a very, very thick document that explains what's going on. By the time you've got the document, things have moved on at a pace, and it's out of date. We've commissioned a body to help us to develop a dashboard of near real-time information, so we can understand very, very quickly how things are changing, and that can enable us then to adjust our plans accordingly. The local industrial strategy is supported by 4 other sector growth strategies. We've got the ICT and digital strategy that is complete, and that is now integrated into the local economic recovery strategy. Ditto advanced materials and manufacturing, another important element of the growth strategy. And the other 2 areas, agri-tech and life sciences, they are very well advanced and were presented to the business board in November for final approval. A little bit of cleaning up to do in some minor areas, but in reality, they're effectively there or thereabouts. So in terms of the strategy and the plans that we have, they have changed, as you will imagine, cognizant of what's happening in the world. We'd like to think we're in a really strong position. We've been able to move quite quickly all credit to the officers within the combined authority. An enormous amount of hard work has been done to keep us up to speed with that and to put us in the best possible position we can when we're making decisions. In terms of investment then, the local growth fund, 147 million of which has been put to work now. There's very little of that left. We've got about 600,000 still to deploy, and that'll be burnt off very, very quickly. That investment has been spread around 5 pillars of the local economic recovery strategy. Accelerating startups and scale-ups, we've put nearly 20 million into that area with a potential of creating nearly 14,000 jobs. Accelerating high-tech job growth, there's an investment there of nearly 23 million, and that's targeted to create 38,000 jobs. Accelerating recovery in construction, 62 million or so has gone into that area, potentially creating just over 5,000 new jobs, and retaining and upskilling for new jobs, retraining, with improved education capacity. That has received investment of nearly 33 million, targeting to create 22,000 jobs. So you rack all those numbers together, and I haven't added them up this morning, but as you could just see, I think just running through that, a significant number of jobs to be created, and the money quite evenly distributed around those 5 or so key pillars of supporting the local economic recovery strategy. And of course, the shape of some of that's changed in recent months, cognizant of where we are and where the opportunities best sit. The last element of that is the business growth service, which is a very innovative flagship program really for the business board, which is about creating the capability and capacity to help businesses to grow, and recognizing that that we're blessed with some really great companies around the patch that often just need a bit of help and support with strategy and thinking and some direct investment training to accelerate their growth. All of those things together fundamentally will underpin the objective of doubling the GVA. That's what it's all about. And our job is to make sure that that funding is going in the right places to give us the best possible return, of course. In terms of skills then, an important element of that is you can't grow without the skills in the workforce to be able to support that. Key elements there, of course, are the Peterborough University. So Peterborough University Phase 1, that's well and truly on track. Completion of the build is due for June 22, with a view to taking students in September 22. The second element of that Phase 2 is coming on very quickly behind, planning applications in process. And this is an extension to the buildings and facilities there to complement Phase 1, the teaching facility, with a research and development facility, with the intent of attracting businesses that want to forge greater and stronger relationships with the academic world to accelerate research and development and take it through into commercialization. The kind of thinking that we've seen in places like Germany that do a very, very neat job of this in actually linking academia with businesses making product. In support of that, we've also got the increased apprenticeship program. There are a number of different activities there, but one of the more significant ones is the ability to unlock the potential 20 million of underutilised apprentice levy funding across the patch. An initiative was launched there, and to date, the levy pot has accumulated some 5 million of that underutilised levy. And what that does is it enables us then to use that, repoint that funding at SMEs who perhaps don't have access to that level of funding to support growth in apprenticeships. In addition to that, there's a skills brokerage service which is being mobilised. That's all about creating linkage between the young people and the demand side of the companies that are looking for people with particular skills and attributes to fill their needs. We've got the retraining scheme, something I'm personally very supportive of. I've unfortunately had to let go of some people from businesses on our patch, very capable, skilled people. What those people need is that they need some help with retraining to find new skills that are perhaps more appropriate to the changing world and what the demand's likely to look like going forward. And therefore, it's incumbent upon us to provide that support to help those people with retraining, to adapt and embrace new ways of working, to learn new skills. We've got some great partners we're working with there, with Marshalls in Cambridge and Peterborough NHS Trust. Sorry, there's really no shortage of both opportunity and a willingness on the part of businesses to engage in this where they can, and rightly so. Ditto with adult education, funding going there towards strategic and operational intent to focus on the outcomes of adult education participation for those residents who are in low skill or on low pay. How can we help those people to embrace their skill set? So work going on there, and some very good work indeed. And finally, on governance, I think since we last spoke in this forum, the business board's been awarded good as a rating from the 2019-2020 annual performance review, which we undertake by BAYS. And notwithstanding that, which I think at that point was an improvement over where it had been previously, we're certainly not standing still on that front. There have been a number of initiatives centred around continuing to drive robustness in process. We've got an awful lot of decision-making processes that we wrestle with regard to allocation of funding, and whilst much of that funding's been put to use now in anticipation of more of it coming through over time, we want to be in the best possible position that we can, and to learn from the investments that have been made previously and the outcomes to shape those processes going forward. I think in a nutshell, that's where we are. I'll be very happy to try and help with any questions.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Austin. I'm sure there are some questions. I know I have one to start with, starting at the end with the governance issues, and Councillor Murphy I know has another question along those lines, and then I'm aware that there are members with other questions as well to ask. My first question to you is that a little while ago, when the combined authority moved to give more decision-making powers to its executive committees, we responded as an overview and scrutiny committee by appointing lead members from our committee to shadow those committees. We also recently appointed a lead member to shadow the business board because of the very substantial areas of work that it's doing, as you've just outlined. However, the current assurance framework does not allow formally for a lead member from our committee to be given any kind of status of that kind in shadowing what you're doing. I wondered how you saw yourself in and the business board relating to Councillor Murphy, who is our lead member. We would like to appoint someone from within our own rank to keep an eye on this and to be focused on the work that you're doing, because it's so important. There's an opportunity, I understand, within the review of the assurance framework to place some sort of lead member role within that. and I wondered how you saw yourself and the board relating to a lead member from this body, and whether you would welcome some formalisation of that relationship.
I think the short answer is yes. You know, anything that we can do to forge links and help with transparency, all to the better. The one of the real challenges, of course, is the nature of some of the work that the business board do. In reviewing, particularly investment, you know, we're in a position of trust on the part of the people who are making the applications that, you know, that information is hugely commercially sensitive. And in that respect, there's a limit to what can and can't be done in trying to maintain that balance of whilst being as transparent as one can, but not at the expense of creating an environment where people are then reluctant to come to you with their ideas and investment challenges. I would happily take that back and talk with the officers to see what can or can't be done there. There's certainly no intent to try and prevent any such thing. It's just a question of the practicalities of it. I mean, and it's a challenge not just for us, it's a challenge for all the LEPs in the UK. I mean, there's 38 LEPs in the UK, and 10 of them hold some of their meetings in public. But again, I mean, it's really just a token gesture. They certainly can't have the debate around the investments that are required in public, and where they may seem to make you know, some element of a statement around transparency in that respect. You can be assured that the meetings that go on behind the public meetings that review the investments are quite separate and have to be for that very reason.
Yeah. I think, however, that's perhaps a different issue, and one I think Councillor Murphy will be coming on to. That's the transparency and meeting in public is slightly different to the question of how the business board might liaise with a lead member from the overview and scrutiny committee. And I fully appreciate what you're saying about the commercial confidentiality of much of the business that comes your way. But would you be happy for us to have a more open a dialogue with you in the month or two, because I think we wouldn't want to miss being able to take advantage of that review of the assurance framework to see whether there's something that we can agree between us that would enable a lead member from our committee to have some role and fulfill some function in keeping us apprised of what's happening at business board level.
Yeah, I think, well, sure, for sure. I mean, would it help if I came to more of these meetings, perhaps? Would that help you?
I think from our point of view, one of the things that concerned us was just the volume of business that we're having to oversee on a monthly basis, and I wouldn't want to lose the opportunity to oversee other also very important aspects of what the combined authority is doing. We have presentations regularly, we have the directors with us, we have chairs of committees with us, all of that is going on. So while I very much welcome having you at these meetings, I think there's a need, if things are to function smoothly, for a more ongoing relationship of some kind. And perhaps we can take outside this meeting what that might look like. But I just hope that there was an acceptance in principle that there was a discussion there to be had. And if we could have that between us in the coming month or so, I think that would be very helpful all round.
Agreed.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. Councillor Murphy, you were going to ask a question, and then I'll come to Councillor Fane.
Yes, if I may, it would help, Austin, if you could speak up. I'm finding it very quiet at your end. I don't know whether you're away from the microphone or it's turned down. Perhaps you and I could speak directly elsewhere about how I can play a role in getting issues discussed at overview and scrutiny where we might be able to help move along your agenda. I'd like to ask some specific questions. One, recently there were some appointments made to a chair of a board in business with some remuneration. I don't know how that went. But more importantly, I'd like to ask you how you see things going on in the future. And now we've moved on from the local economic partnerships and there's more work going on, et cetera, et cetera. For example, there's an awful lot of work going on, but you did mention apprenticeships earlier on as well. Will we be launching a scheme whereby people that are interested in becoming an apprentice can get in touch, or is it already there and are we promoting it? What are some of the issues coming up in the future, and what are some of the wicked issues for the business board that you may want to bring to this forum so we can act as an advisory panel and try and push them along and tease them out? And you mentioned earlier you've been to a meeting before. I can't recall when that was. If you could just remind me, that would be helpful.
I'm sorry, I don't have the date in my head that the last time I came to this forum. Perhaps Lorna would.
I'm thinking in the back of my mind it was about 6 months ago. Does that seem
Sure.
about right?
It's got to be.
Yeah.
I was guessing I'd say earlier this year.
While you're answering,
It was in April.
It was in April, right? So that's not far out then. Yeah.
All right, I'll
Month.
try and work through some of that. So you touched on apprenticeships. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you better now. Yeah.
So during November, we're launching the skills brokerage service. So the intent there is to create a forum for linkage between employers who are looking for appropriate apprentice resource and apprentices and education facilities who are looking to find placements, to act as a brokerage to connect all of those, to find the right people in the right places for the right level of demand. So that is in the process of being launched at the moment, and I think that will address what I think you're looking for there. Apprenticeships are a very important part of the whole skills agenda, of course, and not least of which are very important to me personally. I started my life as an apprentice, so I'm a great supporter of apprentice training programs. So remind me of your next question.
Thank you for that. So on the apprenticeships, I was just wondering where somebody who wanted to be an apprenticeship, it sounds as though there'll be somewhere for them to go to look for opportunities in the future. That's good news, and hopefully we can promote that. So going forward, future issues and developments for the business board as part of the strategy to double GDP in this region. Double it in the right places, but taking account that a lot of it's going to come from where things are going well anyway. Just wondering what you see in the future or the issues that we as an overview and scrutiny committee may want to engage with you on driving forward and looking for the best ways to go. So in the last 6 months, you've been doing certain things. What do you see will be happening in the future? And what are some of the key things that you'll be focusing on?
All righty. So, I mean, there are a number of different fronts there. The COVID situation is obviously a very fluid situation, and we're taking that almost weekly and monthly to learn and understand what the requirements are there, and that will continue, I suspect, for a little while yet to come. We then have the investments that have already been made, and making sure that those investments deliver the outcomes that were stated as the intent when the investments were made. I think there's much more could be done, both ourselves and nationally, actually, at making sure that we properly measure the outcomes from the investments that are made and use that information, A, to deal with any course corrections that might be required, but also as a very, very powerful feed into the decision-making process for future investments. You know, not everything is the resounding success that we might have hoped for right at the front end. The important thing then is that we don't repeat those mistakes and we can learn from that. I'm very anxious that we could learn from other LEPs who've made investments in various different things. And there isn't a particularly good forum to do that, which is disappointing. But nevertheless, it is what it is. So I think much more scrutiny around the outcomes from the investments that have been made, and making sure that we're measuring the right things early on. We're making investments that are often quite long cycles. So the ultimate objective of doubling the size of the economy over time is a very difficult thing to measure until you get there. What is important though is that, you know, what I would call the leading indicators around the investments that are made, that we properly understand those and scrutinize those as time goes by. And as I say, that will then provide a very useful feed going into future investments. Now, quite where we go with future investments and funding, we're anxiously awaiting the news from government as to where they want to go with that, of course, but it is inevitable that we'll continue to receive funding that we can continue to put to good use, and also recycle funding. Some of the investments that have been made actually have a direct payback. That payback may just be in the form of the rateable income from the properties. It may be equity returned. There are all kinds of other opportunities to recycle funding, and that is something that we will have to manage very carefully over time going forward. We're not going to get bored, I can assure you.
Indeed. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Fane.
Rogerson, thank you very much for that very useful overview. I'm going to focus, given the time, on what you were saying in relation to the impact of Brexit. To some extent, this follows up a conversation we had with the Director of Business and Skills at our last meeting, who talked about the discussions which would take place with BEIS about that. Now, you mentioned the local economic recovery strategy, and we've got a very good document on that in front of us, which I see is headed every page, not government policy. There's a section there on the impact of Brexit 2.6. And I was interested in the report from LSE, pointing out that the sectors affected by Brexit are generally different to those currently impacted by COVID-19. I think perhaps we could add that the sectors affected by Brexit are different depending on the outcome of the talks now going on. Some sectors, for instance, and an obvious one is agriculture in this area, are very much more affected by tariffs, sort of 10.5% on fresh vegetables, 69% on processed dairy products and so on, which would come into effect. Now, you mentioned also the future investment funding. I think we used to call the replacement fund the Shared Prosperity Fund, although I haven't seen much about that recently. My question relates to the delivery of those funds and how that could help those most impacted by Brexit. One of the problems is that there are a number of bodies involved in that delivery. And if we look at agricultural funds and structural funds and rural development funds, there is the question of how the work that the business board does in supporting agri-tech businesses and food sector businesses overlaps with the work, for instance, of the RPA acting on behalf of DEFRA. Do you see any scope for more effective delivery of those funds in the future so that we have a more integrated approach?
I certainly like to think so. We've just commissioned a very comprehensive, updated strategy for agri-tech, which was presented to the business board just a few days ago. That's just doing the rounds at the moment with just tidying up one or two little loose ends to get that formally completed. But that certainly touches on the impact of Brexit, whichever which way it might go. I mean, the difficulty, of course, from the Brexit perspective is we really don't know what the answer is yet. You know, I run manufacturing companies, and we're almost in denial about Brexit because you couldn't possibly guess quite how that's going to pan out. We don't even know really what problems we're going to face until we get there. Certainly with export documentation, which inevitably would have some impact on agriculture as well. You know, the processes aren't designed and in place because no one quite knows what to design them around yet. And we're fully anticipating that, you know, it could be 2 to 3 months beyond a decision before all those processes are properly resolved and in place. So it is very, very difficult to plan for something that we don't know what the outcome's likely to be. Mr. Gove recently suggested it was no more complicated than moving house. You have some short-term pain and everything will be great in the long term. Well, you know, we're being forced to move house to somewhere where we don't know where we're going yet. We don't know we can't pack anything because we don't know what size of house we're going to. And when we get there, we won't be able to pay any bills because nothing will be registered anywhere and be no processes to support it. So sorry to seem a bit skeptical, but I think it's one of those challenges that we can't really square up to until we know what the rules of engagement are. What I can assure you is, you know, testimony to what's been done with regard to COVID, the speed at which the business board, the combined authority, and all the officers can move and mobilise activities and interventions when it is clear, I think will be quite breathtaking.
Thank you.
Good. It'll need to be, I think. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you, Lorna. Yeah, if I could ask Austin, clearly within the board geographic area, you've got 3 quite competing different economic areas, and it must be very difficult to bring consistency. Can I ask about how you as a board are able to both offer a combined view as to the economic prosperity of the region, but at the same time build upon the individual strengths and weaknesses of those 3 quite disparate areas? And I suppose the other bit linked to that is, what do you require from us? And obviously I'm biased because I'm Cambridge councillor, but what do you require from us to assist in that process, if indeed anything? Thank you, Austin.
Yes, so I think that is our greatest challenge. Actually, go back to the fundamentals of the local industrial strategy and the sphere report that supported it. You know, we do have the challenges and we have the benefits of 3 quite separate economies, effectively, and 3 different geographies, of course. So keeping a balance of all of that is very important. So when we're looking at investment decisions, there are a couple of considerations. We really don't have a filter that says, you know, we've got to have 1/3 of the investment in one area, 1/3 in another. That is just not a consideration. If there were a plethora of applications that came in for one particular sector or one geography, the only thing that we would have any concerns about is if we've got an over concentration of investment in one particular area, where we may have several well thought through investment opportunities to create jobs. But if all three of them came off at the same time, then there's just not enough people and resource there to support it, and inevitably one or other of them would fail. So there is a bit of an acid test at the end when we're looking at opportunities to say, have we got anything else next door that's going to compete for the same resource that could get conflicted? But beyond that, no. I mean, the measures of the investments are seen through the lens of value for money in terms of job creation and growth. Really, fundamentally, I mean, there's a lot of other things sit around that, but and then of course, if we see an opportunity that can help to link all of those things, where we've got some knowledge-based opportunity that comes out of Cambridge that needs a manufacturing resource to support it, and we can link all of those things together, then happy days. There are very few opportunities that link all three, frankly, but I think the investments in the technical university in Peterborough in that respect are very, very complementary to the more academic centre of where we are in terms of Cambridge, and then the Fens and what we can do there. There's quite a lot of investment gone out into the Fens. I myself have a manufacturing business out in the Fens. There's some great stuff going on out there, particularly linking skills into those areas. And then, of course, there's the feed of all of that into the combined authorities thinking around the more joined up plans, in the sense that we could go full tilt at inward investment to bring pharmaceutical businesses into the centre of Cambridge, but without being locked in step with the housing and the transport links to provide the people that are required, then none of that really works, of course. So there are many facets that all need to be considered in the rounds when we're looking at investments, particularly in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garing, and then I'm going to have to draw this to a close because I know we've got a lot of other business, but Councillor Garing.
Yes, thank you very much for this. I appreciate that the business board is focusing on the current COVID crisis, but I was wondering whether you can shed some light on the attempts to build back better. And have you had any input in the current Climate Commission, in the combined authority? Have you talked to your members about climate change? And finally, I noticed that the original objective was to have parity between men and women on the business board. We're quite a way off from that. I was wondering whether there are any attempts to realize gender parity on the business board.
Okay, well, let's start with the gender issue. So the constitution of the business board is not 50-50 by gender. It has improved quite dramatically over where it was a little over a year ago, of course, with extending the size of the board, and we have been able to attract a number of very, very capable ladies onto the board to help us. So the balance has improved. There is no intent at the moment to take it to 50-50. We're compliant with the requirements of BASE's objectives in terms of the shape of the board in every respect, and there's no plan to change that just at the moment.
Okay.
Marcus, remind me of your other points.
Climate change.
Climate.
Okay, so yes, it's very interesting. Central government's view on how we might change the shape of things going forward with the more green economy. We're all, the members of the business board are all business people, so we're all very much aware of that. And whether you're a supporter of improvements around climate change or otherwise really matters not. From a business point of view, we're about creating jobs and growth, and therein lies a very, very clear opportunity, of course. So increasingly seeing the world through a lens of what's good for the environment is also likely to be what's good for making money and creating jobs too. And inevitably that will percolate down into the decision making. We're certainly seeing more of that, where people are coming forward with investment opportunities. They're very much more cognizant of that, and equally we're much more interested in learning about that to feed into the decision making processes going forward. It's quite refreshing to see, actually. It's probably not so evident to you guys, but we're often sat in judgment over a number of investment decisions at any one point in time, and that is certainly becoming big and bold on the radar screen.
So just for clarity, Austin, does that mean that the business board is engaging with the Climate Commission formally?
Well, not the business board directly, no, but certainly the office of the combined authority will be.
Right, but there's no direct link between the business board and responses to the commission?
No.
No. Right. Okay. I'm going to move us on, and I think we've had a good crack at this. So thank you very much indeed, members, for your questions, and thank you, Austin, for joining us today and speaking with us and keeping us up to date on what's going on. And I'm sure over the coming month we'll be having discussions outside this meeting about the whole lead member assurance framework issue and how we can best engage with yourselves as we go forward. So thank you enormously.
Sure. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Austin.
So then, moving on, members, on to item 6, we have the Combined Authority Budget and Medium-Term Financial Plan. Now, we have 2 opportunities to discuss this, and the first opportunity is now, which I'm going to ask us to restrict ourselves broadly to issues of process and consultation here, because we as a committee will see the Combined Authority budget 3 times, this month, next month, and the month after. But we will also later on in this meeting have an opportunity to frame questions to put to the Combined Authority Board, who will be discussing the draft budget on Wednesday. So if we can find ourselves in this section, please, to questions and discussion about the process and about consultation, then we can deal with the substance of any questions later on, unless there is a question that you need to ask John while he is with us now in order to frame our questions later on, in which case, yes, let's take advantage of John's presence with us. And I'm very pleased to see that John Alsop has now joined us. Hello, John, and thank you very much for coming along. So is there anything you would like to add to the paper that you've given us about the draft Combined Authority budget?
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I'll just introduce it just to go through some of the content. So as you pointed out, this is the first of 3 papers that we'll be bringing to the committee over the course of the setting of the budget and the developing of the medium-term financial plan, which continues to the financial year 2024-25. And again, as you point out, this is an opportunity to go through the process and to discuss some of the main principles and the approach that we've used so far. And the next steps, as you point out, we've got the board, which will be looking to discuss and approve the budget for consultation purposes. And then as part of that process, we will bring back that consultation paper to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee next month. And then as part of the consultation process and one of the named consultees of that process. So there'll be an opportunity to go through the detail of the proposals in a lot more granularity. And then thirdly, after the consultation process has taken place, we will bring back the results of that consultation to the committee in January, in advance of the hopefully the final version of the budget and MTFP going to the board towards the end of January. So in terms of the overarching principles, we've obviously in terms of the budget setting process, the intention is to set an affordable and balanced budget that supports the delivery of the ambitions and priorities of the Mayor and of the combined authority. The proposed budget is built on the version or the refreshed version that went to the board for approval back in June, and that's been updated since then from many budget decisions. We've then attempted to have more of a bottom-up approach. So we've been talking in a lot of detail with directors and with project managers. We've had sessions with the corporate management team and with the Mayor and with leaders, and also with Councillor Count in his capacity as a leader of or portfolio holder for investment and finance. And the intention for that was to ensure that that we have ownership and accountability throughout the organisation. Also, we've, for the first time this year, because of the creation of the 3 new committees, so Transport and Infrastructure, Skills and Housing and Communities, we've taken papers to each of them to ask for their direction, their steer, any guidance that they might have in terms of the development of the budget. We've taken account of the current level of reserves that the Combined Authority has and of our expected annual funding streams. As in previous years, we've kept a clear distinction between capital budgets and revenue budgets, and also to make clear what within the existing MTFP has already been approved by the board and what is still subject to approval. Anything that's subject to approval obviously will still need to go back to the board, usually with a business case, in order to confirm that that project is approved and funded. So in terms of the version going to the board for consultation provides a balanced budget, both in terms of revenue and capital across the lifetime of the MTFP, and assumes no precept. So in terms of next steps, we've got the board meeting on Wednesday, then the consultation period starts. And then we've got the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to discuss the consultation papers in more detail on the 14th of December. The consultation comes to an end at the end of December, and then we're back to this committee on the 25th of January. I'm happy to take any questions in terms of the process or anything else that the committee might have. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, John. So, as I've said, we need to maintain that distinction if we possibly can, please. And bearing in mind that we will have the opportunity to discuss the budget in more detail at our December meeting, if people could please restrict questions about the content of the budget only to those matters where they absolutely have to have an answer now, I would be very grateful. Because John, I think you will be with us next month, won't you? You'll be coming to us again. Yes. So there'll be the opportunity then. On the process terms, I remember that last year there was a fairly limited response to the consultation, I think it's fair to say, on the budget. And much of that response was from people who would actually be deciding the budget, i.e. the leadership of the member authorities. Has anything been done, or is anything planned to be done, to try to widen out the consultation and encourage more response compared to last year?
Yes, you're right. Obviously, there are specific consultees that we need to engage with. So that's all of the constituent councils. So we will be sending copies of the consultation documents to each of the chief finance officers, the leaders, and to the chief executives. Obviously, it goes out to all members of the Overview Scrutiny Committee, all members of the business board. We will also put it onto our website, and our communications team will be sending out messages via social media and other platforms in order to encourage people, members of the public and businesses to engage with us. So it is with our communications team. So we will be, and I know that in the past, last year, for example, they were able to track people who had used social media and to get figures and statistics that came back from usage and how those had been used in order to engage and come back with consultation. So hopefully we can use that in order to target a bit better this time around.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, John. I see a number of hands, and I'll start with Councillor Fane, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question relates to process. This will go to the board on Wednesday, and then we will be able to look at the substance after that. But of course, also on Wednesday, we have the comprehensive spending review. And whilst we don't know what's in that, the first item in the Treasury's list of priorities was strengthening the UK's economic recovery from COVID by prioritising jobs and skills. Presumably that could have some impact on the budget as set. How will the process take account of that particular timing?
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, we're aware that the spending review announcement should be on Wednesday. As you'll be aware, when we updated the MTFP in June, there was a lot of concentration on the impact of COVID, and the budget and the MTFP were refreshed with regard in particular to economic recovery, and that has been the focus going forward. Obviously, the combined authority has taken an active part in the development of the local economic recovery strategy, as Austin Evans talked about earlier on. And yes, we will be able to update the budget during the course of the consultation, depending on the outcome of the CSR. So we do have time in which to be able to understand what the CSR means for us, and we can work that into the consultation process.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fane. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Yes, that's a good answer to Councillor Fane's question, how we deal with uncontrollables over the next few months, particularly from central government. The budget is for future years as well, and I'm wondering how we deal with, in process, uncontrollables that aren't sort of within ourselves, so to speak, and that the Secretariat and the officers will be dealing with. For example, if the board were to have a disagreement with the mayor about the budget, but in the future, there may be some things that come along whereby after May, there may be a new leadership or a change of priorities. There may be environment or a precept to be considered, or central government might kick that in as a possibility, or there may be consequences, for example, Peterborough Authority will run out of reserves before the 1st of April if anything doesn't change. So I'm wondering what the processes will be for some major changes because of uncontrollables. Say a new mayor or the current mayor re-elected says they want to levy a precept, or say central government suddenly throws public health or health at the combined authority. What will the processes be for dealing with that?
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the unknowns, yes, we are aware of that, and as part of the some response funds, as you may recall, we did have some capacity funding in previous versions of the MTFP, and also some amounts earmarked for the development of feasibility studies. So we've earmarked an amount for each of the main areas that will be able to respond to changes of strategy, anything new that's coming out from central government. And in terms of the process, obviously, all of these, if they are still subject to approval, a lot of these feasibility studies we will need to be able to react quickly to that. But in terms of more longer term or capital type interventions, obviously there's the assurance framework that we will need to comply with, and that gives detail about the process in terms of how those projects are taken forward in the the process, going from strategic outline business cases all the way through to business plan and development of the projects themselves. So there are processes that we have in place in order to be able to follow up any future changes that are required.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Gehring.
Yeah, two process question, John. Am I right in assuming that our accounts haven't been audited yet? So how can you set the budget without proper accounts of past years? The second question I had relates to sort of soft issues. It's now good practice in some local governments to look at the climate change impact, look at the social impact together with the budget setting process. Are there any attempts to take climate change or the social impact of the combined authority budget in that direction?
Yeah. Thank you. So in terms of the accounts, they have been substantially audited now. In fact, we have the Audit and Governance Committee on Friday, and we are taking the final version of the accounts to the committee for sign off. There are still one or two minor things that the auditors are still working on, but there's nothing there, as far as I'm aware, that will impact on anything in terms of the reserves, or there are no matters that we will need to change that will impact on our reserves. So I think unless something completely out of the blue came out of the next few days, then I don't think there's any real concern there. In terms of the climate change impact, again, we have put something in as a proposal within the budget to look at the work that the Climate Change Commission has been or is doing, and so there will be some proposed funds to be able to react to that. So yes, we are looking at ways in which things like that can be addressed in terms of the wider combined authority budget.
Thank you. I think just for clarity, John, I think if I may speak on Councillor Gering's behalf, I thought his question was more around how climate considerations were just generally as a matter of routine built into budget deliberations and budget decisions on everything.
Yeah, well, I think it would be within each project development and in terms of their own business case development. Obviously, those considerations are taken into account. So it would then filter through into the budget itself.
So are we looking at things like carbon pricing, for example?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I'm not sure exactly in terms of the detail, but perhaps we can take something away if you've got a specific question, then we can look at that.
Well, if you want to consider that over the next month, I'll make a note to ask the same question in December.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any more hands. I think the two hands that are up, Councillor Fain and Councillor Gehring, were legacy hands. I don't see any further questions at the moment, bearing in mind we will have another opportunity to discuss with yourself, John, in December. So thank you very much for that as an initial run at it, and we'll see you in a month's time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Moving on then to item 7, Ely capacity enhancements. We should shortly have Roland Potter with us to talk about the railways. And do we have Roland?
I'm here now, Chair.
Oh, marvellous. Hello, Roland. Thank you
Hello.
very much indeed, and welcome to the committee. So you've given us some information about Ely capacity enhancements. Do you have anything you wish to tell us about this before we ask you any questions we may have?
I would like to just make a slight note of amendment to item 2.3, the last paragraph, where we talk about a letter of support for the consultation proposals being sent to Network Rail. At the time of writing this, that was the intention. However, as a funding member on the programme board, we verbalised our responses to Network Rail with our challenges, and we have also briefed Mayor Palmer, who is meeting with the Rail Minister very shortly, on the elements in this paper in terms of what we believe we should continue to lobby for, which is more than 11 train paths per hour, basically. Apart from that, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Roland. Members, are there any questions for Roland on this? If you could use your blue hand to indicate, please. One thing I do have a question about, I'm not seeing any other hands at the moment, but one thing I'm not clear about is the extent to which the proposals that are being put in place will ameliorate existing deficits and the immediate and address immediate future needs, and to what extent they are future-proofed for the longer term. Because this is quite a substantial undertaking, and if it only lasts 7 or 8 years, say, to pluck a figure at random out of the air before we're facing the same issues again, then we will have missed an opportunity. How far ahead are we looking in this, and how far are we able to look in this, and how far ahead is it addressing future needs?
Well, it's absolutely the right question, and within this paper I've detailed our objectives, which are to lobby for greater capacity than that is currently proposed in this consultation of 11 train paths per hour. To clarify as well, 11 train paths per hour is actually only 10 trains per hour, because the Liverpool to Norwich train, the East Midlands Rail, actually goes through the Queen Adelaide crossings, and that's the crucial point on its way into Ely, and then it turns and it goes back through the Queen Adelaide crossings, albeit on a different crossing to that it entered, on its way to Norwich. So it takes 2 of those train paths within the hour.
Yeah.
11 train paths per hour, as you may well have seen, the Cambridgeshire County Council written response, I think, may have been published now. It only really fulfills the original franchise agreements for Greater Anglia services of 1 train per hour Peterborough to Ipswich, and the Kings Lynn 1 train path per hour additional Kings Lynn to London. and then the additional 3 freight train pass per hour. So that really only fulfills the existing franchise agreements. Now, there's some complexities here, of course, because the franchise system and the timetabling for the franchise system is potentially up for debate now that it's a concession process. So, and of course, the COVID impact. So there's some unknowns. I heard the words unknown in the previous article. I think there are some unknowns that need to be worked through. The position as it stands is that Network Rail have undertaken a strategic outline business case that has proposed 11 train pass per hour, and the Department for Transport, as the major funder, have committed £13.1 million to fund that further stage outline business case for the 11 train pass per hour. But we are continuing to lobby exactly on your point, Councillor Dupre, in terms of there's a great opportunity here. Do we want to, if there's a possibility of maximising capacity without the need for grade separated solutions such as that at Warrington, that's quite expensive and underway at the moment at Peterborough, you know, is this not the time to explore that? So we're lobbying that with the Department for Transport, who effectively make that decision, both at officer level and, as I say, directly with the Rail Minister.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you, Chair. Roland, thank you very much for the information and for the report. I'm very much in favour of expanding our rail capacity, particularly in relation to freight. Now, presumably, once these modifications are in place, we will have seamless transport capacity for freight directly from the Midlands to the East Coast ports. But ultimately, with East West Rail in the margins, will this also give us seamless connection from the sort of Bedford, Milton Keynes, Oxford area directly to the East Coast ports? And if so, will those freight trains be running overnight? Thank you.
So, thank you, Councillor. There's some complexity in this situation. The Ely North Junction and the Ely, so there's three sections to this piece of Ely core, and there's a graphic within this that has a red dotted line around it, which goes Peterborough, Kingsley, and Ely and Cambridge, and that's slightly been moved out from the previous boundary, which was initially to the east of Peterborough, and it's now been pushed out to the west. This piece of work looks very much at the engineering solutions that are required to increase the capacity in this Ely core area. In terms of maximising the amount of train paths that can be then utilised through this core area, there is a reliance on other activities along the Peterborough to Ipswich route, and they include signalling improvements, which is the digitisation project that is underway currently within Network Rail. There's the crossing solutions, wider crossing solutions. So some crossings are being looked at within this Ely area core, but there are significant crossings between Peterborough and Ely that may need, will need at some point in the future consideration to maximise the opportunities along that line, and also between Ely and Ipswich, which again would be required to fully maximise the freight opportunities through. So at this moment in time, they're talking about an additional 3 freight trains per day, each way. But if those external constraints outside of the Ely area core are undertaken as additional projects, and that's for BFT and Network Rail to still consider and decide, then that will get considerably greater freight opportunity. In terms of East West Rail, the Ely capacity core is taking some consideration of East West Rail, but of course East West Rail is still to determine its actual route and therefore its actual contact points. So there's a question there possibly to be put back to East West Rail that I'm unable to answer. But I think the ambition is that this constraint is resolved so that capacity for freight Felixstowe to the Midlands is significantly enhanced, and the opportunity is future-proofed for significant enhancement. And of course, our ambition is to maximise that freight opportunity, because it will take HGV lorries off the roads that dissect our region, and therefore remove a lot of the carbon impact of that as well. But equally, we're passionate about the additional capacity enabling better stopping services at the Fenland stations, and of course the future Wisbech to March and Wisbech on to Cambridge proposals that we've got currently in play.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful.
Thank you. And Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chairman. Roland's answered a lot of what I was going to ask, actually, in terms of the freight, but I'll try and sort of pick out the bits that you haven't. I'm not clear on. You mentioned an increase of three freight trains an hour. Is that not? It's up. I think it's up to 3, isn't it now, or a total? And what I was going to ask, and I know there's a fair bit of freight going through there at the moment. I just wondered what sort of increase that would be, because touching on your point about Felixstowe, a lot of the freight will come along the Peterborough to Ipswich line from, the Felixstowe container port. And the other thing that I couldn't see in the paper, which I know will help alleviate some of the Ely problem, is what we call the Western Loop, just eastern side of Newmarket, where the trains can, if that was back in place, and it's on land owned by Godolphin, one of the racing stables at the moment, and I believe the track bed's still there, but obviously the track isn't. It will enable trains to come from Ely through Soham, then into Newmarket and then Cambridge, because obviously the problem you've got is with the new Soham station, get to Cambridge, they've got to literally go up to Ely and change and come, which is obviously going to increase the capacity going through the Ely North Junction. I just wondered what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, so thank you, Councillor. Clarification, it's freight trains per day additional, not freight trains per hour. Okay. So it's a limited number of freight trains per day additional. And the ambition is, I think, for Network Rail and Department of Transport for that to increase significantly if these wider constraints along the Felixstowe to Nuneaton line are resolved in terms of the crossings that I mentioned, the additional crossings, and
if I can just come back in on that one, because obviously the more we can get that freight coming from Felixstowe on the rail, the less we're going to get all of the lorries which on the A14, which most of those are just going up to Manchester or Liverpool or Birmingham or whatever, and that will massively help with the climate impact. Absolutely.
And it's an argument that I make every programme board, I can assure you. And there's other aspects as well. Normally you're looking at a freight train being 75 cars long, and that's effectively 75 HGVs off the road for every freight train that goes through. The capacity constraints on this line at the moment mean the train lengths are only 33 cars long, so it's only 33 HGVs. Now 33 HGVs is significant in terms of decarbonisation, and that's absolutely true. Those vehicles currently go through our region without any economic benefit to our region, but a big carbon impact to our region. So we're very supportive of increased freight on this route. There is significant potential for freight from Felixstowe to Nuneaton and up to Warrington, etc., the 2 routes. And Felixstowe themselves are lobbying very hard, Network Rail and DFT, as are Suffolk, in terms of ensuring that the additional activity between Ipswich and Ely in terms of crossings is resolved in the future. But the Ely core capacity will be in place once those other restrictions are removed if they are. But absolutely, it's an argument that we make that rail in this northern part of our region is fundamentally important for integrated transport solutions, and one of the big factors is taking, well, the two big factors are taking or giving people the opportunity to consider rail as a real alternative to their car to get to the places of work and leisure and just their living, etc. And of course, removing HGV vehicles from the road for freight has a significant impact on the decarbonisation. There are other methods that will be looked at, I'm sure, over time, and hydrogen is obviously becoming another factor on the agenda in developing that HGVs could consider. But you're absolutely right. Now, going on to your other point about the Newmarket Loop, Suffolk are very keen on resolving this issue, and equally, I believe, are discussing with Network Rail opportunities there, and I myself have had discussions with Suffolk as to how we could possibly support that, and then equally the Snailwell Loop, which is a devolution commitment of ours, so that will come onto the agenda as well. But I think the key things are, the argument from my perspective is we need to build resilience into the rail network as well as the capacity. So we have improved opportunities. So if there is an incident on a particular route, you've got a diversionary route. At the moment, if there's an incident on a route, you've got to get on a bus. And that doesn't help freight. That means it just puts more onto the HGVs. So there's a certain amount, and we do this in roads as well, there's a certain amount of looking at what the current routes are and looking at increasing the capacity, but also looking at increasing the resilience in the network. And this is the sort of discussions I have regularly with Network Rail and DFT.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Councillor Hay.
Thank you. I believe the combined authorities is very supportive at the moment of the opening of the Wisbech rail line. I'd like to understand a bit more on the interdependencies of opening the Wisbech rail line with the Ely area capacity and how this affects the business case for the Wisbech rail line.
Thank you, Councillor Hay. Well, as we've reported in our previous reports to the Combined Authority Board, the Wisbech rail proposal was developed with a very high benefits cost ratio for a 2 trains per hour direct service Wisbech to Cambridge. That proposal is very much dependent on capacity through Ely area capacity. So improvements there are important. We are negotiating still with the Department for Transport, and it's again a subject that will be raised direct with the Rail Minister when the Mayor meets. And there was an alternative suggestion or recommendation within the options appraisal report for Wisbech Rail that stated an interim solution could be Wisbech to March, with the continuation then onto Cambridge as rail paths become available. So there isn't a dependency, but it's a dependency based on train paths, and that's the discussion we're having with Network Rail and Department of Transport at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. And I don't see any further questions. So thank you very much indeed, Roland, for coming to answer our questions today. And that's been a useful discussion, I think. So thank you enormously.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious now of time. We have 35 minutes left before I'd like to draw this meeting to a close as close to 1 o'clock as I can. We now have a discussion about how we scrutinise the special purpose vehicle which has been established to fund the CAM metro system. So Robert Parkin, please, if you could tell us a bit about this.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'm just yeah, I'd hoped to hit the ground absolutely running, and I just seem to have disappeared my report, but it's coming back.
I know.
Here we go. Yeah. So thank you, Chair and members. This report is seeking to update the committee on arrangements in relation to the scrutiny of OneCam Limited, which is the SPV set up by the combined authority to deliver OneCam. Members will see from the report, which references the combined authority board report, that OneCam was established earlier this year. It's been incorporated. It's enjoined to deliver to a business plan, and among the control measures that it has are a shareholders agreement which constrains its actions for approval by the board. The report touches upon general arrangements that the combined authority has in place as vis-a-vis its other trading companies. It refers in part 4 to the powers of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and those are derived from specific legislation that applies to combined authorities. They are broadly parallel with local authority scrutiny powers, and essentially they are that any matter decided by an authority's executive or the combined authority board, or mayor in this case, can be subject to scrutiny, review and call-in. Clearly we're dealing with an instance in the case of OneCam of a separated out entity. The way it touches upon the combined authority is through the combined authority board's role in relation to that shareholder role and the reservation of the business plan. So the combined authority scrutiny committee is very much watching the watcher, as it were, when it comes to looking at the SPV. But it feels and looking later in the report which talks about the SPV's arrangements to audit itself and look at itself, it feels to me, as we're moving forward with the SPV and appointing key members, and as time goes by, getting the board in place and getting it to start to function, that there's an opportunity to work a little more closely to set up arrangements to perhaps share information. That would be very much something for us as officers to support as a process. As I say, the backstop position is that the combined authority board, whenever it's carrying out activities in relation to that shareholder function, looking at the delivery of the by the SPV of the business plan, then the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has a role. So I think a task ahead for us, and this is an update report, a task ahead is to further devise and refine that working model. And as time goes by and the company starts to function, and its appointees start to take a role, there will be that opportunity to develop that working model. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. Councillor Gehring.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. I welcome this clarification, and it shows us that there are quite a few overview and scrutiny powers that we can exercise, even with these arm's length endeavors. My main question refers to those powers, because we can only sort of exercise them if we're actually informed of important decisions. And that's where I found your paper a little bit thin. So how is the information flow actually happening for us to scrutinize some of those very important decisions, right? So for example, where the Chem One CEO wants to place a garden village is going to be of crucial importance, and not just to the board, also to us as a scrutiny committee. So how are we going to receive that information flow besides inviting the CEO to our meetings?
Happy to come back, Chair.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, so thank you. Yeah, it's a really important point that we have, I think, as a challenge to meet. Thinking through the process, the Combined Authority Board reserves to it the approval of the business plans and these key strategic points. These points would come back to the Combined Authority Board, anything which is a function of the board in relation to these activities, of course, is a matter for this committee, Review and Scrutiny Committee. I think it's given that it's operating at a remove and that's yet to take place as it were establishing the process. I think it feels to me to be an open challenge to work with the SPV and also this committee to design something which meets those imperatives of sightedness, and also reflecting the nature of the relationship between the SPV and the board. So that for me feels like an open challenge. I couldn't address today how that will look, save that I think I have a sense of what we, as it were, the nature of that challenge and how we may negotiate it. But that's something I think I would say is something to work up rather than to give you anything on in full today.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions to ask of Robert Parkin on this? I mean, it does seem to me that there is an issue here to be bottomed out, and I'm wondering whether we can find time in our busy schedule to invite the chair and the CEO of the SPV. The chair already has been appointed, Lord Mayor, and the CEO is due to be appointed by the board on Wednesday. To invite them to have an initial discussion with us about the SPV and to talk to them about the ways in which we might seek to engage with them as the SPV carries on its work. Does that seem a sensible ask to make at this stage? People agreeing? Want to say anything about that? Yes, there seems to be an agreement. I'm looking at our work programme and thinking it already looks rather hefty for December, but possibly January or February when we come to look at our work programme later on. Robert, does that fit?
I think so, yes, because that I think reflects the realistic timetable of the apparatus internally of the company being established, and that for that leadership to drop in. So I wouldn't want to. I think time is obviously crucial for everybody, and I'd want to have something appropriately developed and matured for this committee to look over and work with, rather than to sort of make any assumptions at this stage, because it feels to me that it needs to be a dialogue to develop it, rather than, as it were, a direction.
All right, thank you. So perhaps when we look at our own work programme under item 12, we can pencil it in for some stage in the early spring or late winter or early spring, February, March time, and then see what the optimum time is to have them come to us if they're willing to do so, as I hope they will be. Does that satisfy for the moment? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much indeed. On then to item 9, the Combined Authority Board agenda, which I believe is still online. We had a bit of a problem with it disappearing this morning, but I think it's back and still up there. So this is to consider the agenda for the meeting of the Combined Authority Board and raise any questions that we may wish as a committee to raise with the board. What I'll do, I've got a number of issues that I want to raise, and members, you may have others. So perhaps if I quickly run through the different items of substance rather than just the general straightforward ones, and then you could indicate, please, if there is an issue you want to raise on one of these points. The first item of substance on the agenda is the Cambridge changes of representation and substitutes to the Employment Committee. I think is straightforward. 1.7 on their agenda is to appoint the new Chief Executive Officer of OneCam. And I wondered whether we might want to ask something about the salary that is being proposed, which is £225,000 plus 10% performance Councillor Gehring, you're indicating that you might have something to say on this.
Yeah, I think at least expressing some concern about the process and how we make these high-level sort of hiring decisions and the attached salary. I don't think it's an ad hominem decision. I think it's generally a question, and related to that is also the question of remuneration of board members, right? £40,000 per year strikes me as perhaps low in private sort of company settings, but strikes me as very high for a few days of work for each of the board members. So I think both the level of salary, the terms of the contract, and the salary for the board members requires a lot more scrutiny, given the tight budget prospects that we have in this combined authority. It's just inappropriate at this day in time.
Thank you, Councillor Gehring. The board appointments are under a separate item. They're under 4.1. 1.7 is purely about the appointment of the CEO and the salary and terms associated with that. So if you wanted to ask about the board, we could ask that under 4.1, but under 1.7 for the moment, do we want to ask something about how the salary and terms have been evidenced and justified?
Yes, please.
What, right, I'm seeing one yes. Is there anybody who disagrees with that? Are we happy to ask that as a question? If you wish to dissent from asking that as a question, then please indicate using your blue hand. I don't see currently any dissent, so we're happy to ask that as a question, and I'll send round a draft of that once we've got that done. So we're going to ask about how the salary of the SPV CEO has been evidenced and justified. The next item on their agenda of substance is their budget monitor update. Does anybody wish to ask anything about the budget monitor update of the board? I'm not seeing anything at the moment, no. 2.2 is the draft budget and medium-term financial plan, which we've just been discussing, and which we will have the opportunity to discuss at our next meeting. I did wonder whether we might want to ask something about the medium-term financial plan. I see Councillor Hay, I'll come to you in a second, but the medium-term financial plan, all I see in this document, unless I'm missing something, is just an extension of a few figures into the years following the coming financial year. I don't see any notes of any strategy or any rubric to go with that explains what the medium-term financial plan is, as opposed to just an extension of a few figures. And I was going to ask whether there was any indication of what the financial plan was, and if so, whether we would be expecting to see that within these documents, because I don't unless I've missed it. So that was going to be a question I thought we might want to put, but I'll go to Councillor Hay first.
Yes, I have a question about the draft budget. The CPA board proposals shows the summary revenue budget and MTF. The EU fund goes right through to 23-24 in the budget line. Does that relate to funding received prior to Brexit, or is it due to something that's been agreed prior to Brexit, but we won't receive the money till after Brexit?
Right, okay. I'm not sure I have an answer, or that we have currently an answer to that, unless one of the officers is able to advise. I suspect that there are a lot of funds such as this that have been allocated prior to Brexit, and that we are still using up in various ways to carry on various projects. But I'm happy for us to ask the question if people would like us to do so. Are we happy to ask that question? Don't see any dissent on there. No. Okay, let's ask that. Yeah, and yep.
Yep. The staffing budget shows anticipated annual pay awards of 2% plus with an allowance for performance-related pay increments. In view of the fact that government is likely to announce a public pay freeze, will the CPCA be introducing a pay freeze over this period of time?
Right, okay. Are we content to ask that question as well? I mean, we will be returning to these matters, as I've said earlier, in December, but happy to put some initial questions. Are people content that we ask those two questions that Anne has raised? And also the question that I've raised about the strategy that that should be accompanying the MTFP figures. All content with that? No dissent? Okay, thank you. The next item on their agenda is then the allocation of the additional funds to the highways agencies and pothole grants and home to school transport funds. I think that's fairly routine. I don't suspect there's going to be any questions about that. Fairly straightforward, isn't it, I think. Allocation of the Getting Building Fund, and note the key decision made by the Mayor, that's just for notes, so there's not much we could do with that anyway. Then there's the CAM Special Purpose Vehicle, and this is where Councillor Gehring's question comes into play about the appointment and remuneration of non-executive directors, Chief Finance Officer amendment to heads of terms and opening of the bank account, delegating arrangements for various contracts and key elements of the delivery strategy for the CAM. So Councillor Murphy, your blue hand is up.
Yes, Chair. I was wondering whether we could ask about remuneration to other chairs of committees as well. The business one was appointed. I still don't know who's decided what payment to give and how much it is.
Sorry, this is a remuneration of whom?
It's the business board committee. Yeah, the chair.
Yep.
We discussed it at our last overview and scrutiny, and I still don't know. So just wondered if you could ask, when you're asking about remuneration for one CAM board members, if we could have a breakdown of what else goes on as well. Because unless it's clear, folk might suspect that appointees, well, I won't say any further, but I think there are some concerns about money being given to people who are appointed possibly at the patronage of the board, i.e. the Mayor.
Could we park that until next month, I think, Councillor Murphy, and then if you've got a question that is specifically about the budget, we can ask.
I'll take it elsewhere because I haven't found out who decided how much money yet. I'll see if I can find it out from officers.
Right, let's park that one for the moment, if we may. So on the item 4.1, the CAM, Councillor Gehring, you wanted to ask a question about remuneration of the non-exec directors. What was the question you were wanting to ask?
Yeah, the question is given that there is probably going to be a public sector pay freeze, is it appropriate for a few days of work to basically award an annual salary that equals that of a nurse or a junior medical practitioner? I don't think so, right? So either we find non-executive directors with the necessary skill set that are willing to put in some pro bono time, or we massively reduce the amount of money. But splashing out £40,000 per year for a few days of work is, in this day and age, is just wholly inappropriate.
How do people feel about asking that as a question? Yeah, Not seeing any dissent on that. So we can ask a question about the background to the remuneration of the non-exec directors then. I think my question more broadly on this item was that throughout this paper, throughout this agenda, there's quite considerable spending proposed on the CAM and on the SPV for something which is by no means certain in the expectation that it will be implemented. And I'm therefore wondering whether we should be raising that fact of the large amounts of money at this stage being committed to this project when we don't know a number of key fundamentals. We don't know when the technology is going to be chosen. We don't know when the outline business case will be completed. We don't know when the central tunnels will be installed. We're not clear about the milestones, I don't think. So there's a lot of things that we don't know. We don't know whether the government will commit funding to this in any serious way. So given all of that and how there's no realism about the funding at present, whether the board is, how the board can justify this level of expenditure on something which at this stage is very largely speculative. And I think I'd like to ask a question about where they're going with that, bearing in mind the sums involved. So I've got a couple of blue hands up. Councillor Murphy, is yours a legacy hand or is it a fresh
No,
hand?
it's up, Chair. I think you are right. I mean, maybe we should be looking at this ourselves, but I think you are right to pose the question. Why are they committing so much money to something that may never actually happen? We don't need an Apollo mission. We need to sort the buses out. By the time this gets going, we could have driverless cars, for example, 2/3 of cars off the road because people won't be parking them outside their houses, etc. There could be dramatic changes. So this is a massive financial commitment. We've just talked about remuneration, etc. When the combined authority perhaps should be focusing on the here and now. So, yeah, I think it does need to be raised.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davey.
Simply to support yourself, Chair, and also what Councillor Murphy's just said, seems like the wrong way round, spending a lot of money on the posts and a board for something that we don't know is actually going to happen. It doesn't make sense. And so therefore, I think there should be some question as to the timescales involved, the contracts involved, and what sort of recompense will come back if it doesn't actually take place. It just, to me, it doesn't make sense. So I'd be grateful if you could take this forward, Lorna. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody dissent from us asking a question along those lines? I'm not seeing any dissent. I'm seeing Councillor Davies' hand still up. I'm assuming that that's a legacy hand.
Yeah, forgive me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, right, okay. Not seeing any dissent, then we will ask that question. We then have 4.2 Fenland Stations regeneration. Do we have any questions on that? Not seeing any. 4.3 Fengate strategic outline business case. No. 4.4 Oxford to Cambridge Arc, which is just for noting. 4.5 Market Towns Programme Investment Prospectus. Any questions on that? 4.6 Devolution Deal, Gain Share Gateway Review and Combined Authority Prospectus. I looked with interest at, sorry, is that someone speaking? No. I looked with interest at the Devolution Deal Commitments Review, the appendix, which had updates on all 71 of those commitments. And there were a number that I wanted to pick out and I thought were worth probing further by way of a question. So if I could run past those quickly. The first one was the first commitment, which is double GVA over 25 years, and we've already had a bit of a discussion about that. I just wanted to ask whether whether we were realistically still talking about doubling GVA, considering the hit that we've had to the economy from various angles. The comment on that is quite positive, that we're running ahead of the trajectory needed to deliver the target, and I thought it would be worth probing that a little bit further. The next one was number 4, which is transforming public sector delivery in health and social care, community safety and employment. And the comment on that references the Independent Commission on Public Sector Reform, where we were awaiting a report. I've certainly not seen, and this committee hasn't seen, anything at all with reference to the work of the Public Sector Reform Commission. And again, I thought that was something that we ought to be probing, considering this is quite a significant issue. So I thought we could ask for an update on its work and what it has done to date, and when something will be put in the public domain. The third one I had was on number 6, which was provide world-class connectivity to connect passengers, which is described as in progress. And I thought we might want to ask how world-class connectivity is being defined, and how we will know that we have reached something that is actually world-class. The fourth one was number 14, and the plans for the Joint Assets Board, where the commitment is to establish and chair a Joint Assets Board for economic assets to review all land and property held by the public sector. And that's noted as not yet implemented, and the Joint Assets Board has not yet been established. I thought we could ask for a timeline and progress on that. 18 is about the £100 million housing fund, and that was in progress. I think we need to probe some more about the holding back of the 45 million from that £100 million fund, and ask when and how that impasse with central government is going to be resolved, and how, if it's not resolved, it will affect the delivery of that particular commitment, including also the lack of clarity about whether the commitment is to start on those schemes by 31st of March 2021 or 2022, as the response to Councillor Scott's questions to the most recent Housing Committee still left that hanging up in the air. So I thought that was an important question to ask. 34, the commitment is local authorities to bring forward non-statutory strategic infrastructure delivery plans to support the combined authority housing and transport delivery plans. And that is not yet implemented, so we could ask for an update on that. 35 talks about proposals for a second devolution deal, and that's not yet implemented, but proposals are expected. And I thought we could perhaps ask for clarity about what the expectations are on that. 39 is the business rates localization. It's government to work with the combined authorities to influence design of local government finance system, including localization of business rates. And the note is that central government's proposals have not progressed. So we could ask what is happening there and what impact that has for us. 41, similarly, strategic planning powers to be devolved to the mayor, and again, not yet implemented by government. So a similar question about that. 43, with government form an education committee with the regional schools commissioner and other key local education stakeholders, not yet implemented, with no explanation in that. So a similar question on that one. 46, similarly, work with government to explore a more integrated pathway of service delivery for the causes of offending behaviour early to reduce the use of courts and prisons. I'm not sure that makes sense at a grammatical level, but it's certainly not implemented, and I'd be interested to ask a similar question about that. 53 talks about sub-regional transport bodies, and the note is that that's being pursued by England's economic heartland. So I'd ask for an update on that. Just two more to go. 58. There is a commitment in there about developing proposals for ambitious reforms in planning services that can streamline the process and accelerate decision making. And that's down as not yet implemented. I'd be wanting to ask whether that's referring to the government's white paper planning for the future, or whether that's something different. And finally, 69, area reviews. This is, again, the schools commissioner, work with the schools commissioner and relevant local authorities to consider specific issues arising from the area reviews. And that says not yet implemented by government, but the rubric says that the Department for Education did not engage the combined authority in those reviews, and that the last of the area reviews were concluded in August 2017. So again, there's an update question, it seems to me, to be asked there, because it's saying not yet implemented as if it's going to be, when I can't see any way in which it will be. So are you happy for me to ask those questions on your behalf? And are there any others in that paper that you would want to ask questions about? Any dissent from asking those questions? Don't see any. Okay, thank you. 5.1 is the local transport plan CAM sub-strategy. And my question on that was what the board envisaged the role of the Greater Cambridge Partnership to be in that, because it is barely, if at all, mentioned in the report, which seems a rather odd omission. Are you comfortable with me asking that question on your behalf? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on that from anybody? Not seeing any. Then we've got a 5.2 March area transport study. 5.3 A47 dualling, which is just to note. 5.4 Cambridge Southeast Transport, better public transport and active travel consultation, which is just to delegate making a response. Local Growth Fund Programme Management. 6.2 is Growth Deal Project Proposals. 6.3 Local Economic Recovery Strategy. I've got a question on that. I was wanting to ask, it describes three different shapes of recovery, three different scenarios, I suppose, if you like. And it wasn't clear to me in the paper which one of those the combined authority was working to. So I thought that might be a question to be asked. Councillor Davey, you have your blue hand up.
Yeah, it was to pick up Councillor Fane's point earlier on about Brexit. I think it'd be worthwhile raising that. I think that's within that paper as well. And also with regards to that, it's about the work. It's kind of linked on a different topic to the point you just made about the GCP. I don't know about elsewhere in the county, but it's just whether or not and how the combined authority is working on recovery with the GCP and the local authorities across their area to make sure that there is proper liaison in terms of COVID recovery plans. I suppose it's about seeking reassurance, Lorna.
Okay. People comfortable with that as a question? Yeah. Okay, I don't see any dissent from that, so that's good. So we've got some questions there on that item. 6.4 is the Business Board Annual Report. Questions on that? 6.5, IMET. And 6.6 is the Kickstart scheme, which has already gone through Skills Committee, I think. So that's quite a ton of questions to ask them. So I'll work on those and circulate those to you as quickly as possible. I'll work with officers on those. Forward plan then at item 10. Is there anything anybody wants to pick out of the combined authority forward plan from the committees or the board perspective? I think we're fairly well organised in terms of aligning what we're doing in the coming few months to what's coming up. No, nothing from anybody on that. Okay, thank you. Item 11 then is the lead member questions and answers. So we'll receive those. Thank you very much indeed to Councillors Coles and Scott for putting their questions to their respective committees. Is there anything that either of you would want to add to what we've got in front of us? Councillor Coles?
No, thanks, Chair. I'm very happy with the responses I've had there. The only bit is outstanding is I think I've predicted what officers will come up to in the future. So I was a bit previous, as they say.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Scott? No? Okay. We can barely hear you, Councillor Scott.
Oh, well, I'll shout. I'm saying no, but I'm appreciating that you, Councillor Dupre, are intending to ask a follow-up question in regard to the 45 million, because it's absolutely crucial, and they do acknowledge themselves that it will be inhibiting of the obligation they have to produce the number of houses that they've committed to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Item 12 then is our work programme. And as I say, I think we're fairly ahead on that. We wanted to pencil in the chair and CEO invitation for the SPV at an appropriate time early in the spring or late in the winter, February, March time maybe. I think that's probably the only change we were going to make, unless officers advise me that I've forgotten something we discussed earlier. No, otherwise?
No, as presented.
Okay, marvellous. So we're comfortable with the work programme going forward then? Thank you very much indeed. And then the date of our next meeting, which looks to be quite a lengthy one, is on the 14th of December. And it would be very helpful indeed, as we have the Mayor in attendance in two capacities, firstly as the Mayor and secondly as Chair of the Transport Committee. It would be very helpful to have questions in advance, please, so that we can have some substantive answers from the Mayor if at all possible. And the deadline I'm suggesting for that is questions to be submitted by Tuesday the 8th of December. So over the next couple of weeks, if members could give some consideration to what they might like to ask the Mayor in both of those capacities, that would be really helpful. So with no further ado, and with all of that business now done and 4 minutes over, thank you very much indeed, members, for your input into this morning's proceedings. Thank you very much, officers, for your contributions and your facilitation of the meeting. And I wish you all a pleasant day and a pleasant week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.